Greetings everyone on the Our Days Stories channel. Today we have a story of survival on a seemingly paradise island. However, for those who found themselves there, it turned into a real hell. Let's take it step by step. The true hero of our story is not a man, but a whole island, Clipperton Island, named so in honor of the English pirate John Clipperton, who allegedly sailed past it in 1705 on a hijacked Spanish bark. Later, in 1711, the French rediscovered the island and made a rough map of it. The captain of the ship, de Quadic Michael Dobat, described the place as a large rocky cliff with a sharp peak at the southern end of a completely flat island. There was some sand on the northeast side with a few bushes and dried-up trees. This island is a very narrow strip of land with a large lake in the center. On the west side are a few low bushes growing on a thin layer of soil and a rock. It is quite low, but a little higher than the east side. Despite its small size, the island is only 1.7 square kilometers. It features a lush lagoon, but overall, there's very little vegetation because of the massive number of crabs that leave no room for plants. You'd think this tiny piece of land would be of no value to anyone, but that was not the case. There were significant deposits of guano on the island. To simplify, guano is fossilized bird droppings that were highly valued as fertilizer due to its high phosphates content. In 1858, France annexed the island, and by 1897, Mexico took over, explaining that the island was close to its territory. The Mexicans built a lighthouse on the island and began mining guano. They even brought in some coconut palms and, most importantly, pigs. Pigs drastically reduced the crab population by eating them, and a small layer of fertile soil appeared on the island, leading to some vegetation. Of course, France wanted to reclaim the island taken by Mexico, and the English were interested in developing phosphates on this small piece of land. However, Mexico was determined to keep the territory and stake its claim on the island. In 1906, a group of 36 people, including 12 soldiers, led by Captain Ramon Arno, along with their wives and children, landed on the island. They were supposed to represent a military garrison and solidify Mexico's ownership. The settlers quickly adapted to this small piece of land and established a simple life, building houses and gardens. Every 2 months, Mexico sent supplies and necessities to the colonists from Acapulco, so they didn't have to live like Robinson Crusoe. If they wished, they could return to the mainland, Mexico. For instance, Ramon Arno went back to Mexico in 1908 to marry Alice Rivera Gomes, the daughter of a Catalan merchant. The young family then returned to Clipperton Island and continued their life there. Over time, the population grew, reaching 100 people by 1914. However, everything changed in one day when a powerful hurricane hit the island in January 1914, nearly wiping away everything. The people took shelter in the lighthouse on the rocks, but the hurricane destroyed all the gardens, houses, and almost all the trees on the island. Only 9 coconut palms survived. This disaster occurred amid a civil war in Mexico, and while supplies were still coming to the island initially, the situation changed after the cyclone. Revolutionaries intercepted the ship carrying supplies to the island and took all the provisions while sinking the vessel. The islanders remained unaware of this development. They thought the ship sank due to a hurricane and tightened their belts, waiting for the next food supply from Acapulco. They couldn't simply forget about the island. In the big land, there was a revolution in full swing, with bloody battles and constant changes in government. They had no time for a forgotten piece of land in the middle of the ocean. However, Captain Arno, being an officer, refused to believe this. He ordered them to save food and wait. The islanders, cut off thousands of kilometers from the nearest land, had no idea what was happening in the big land. A month passed, and there was still no ship with provisions. Captain Arno ordered to distribute the coconuts from the remaining 9 palms among the women and children, just to somehow save them from scurvy. Each person received 1 coconut per week. They also survived by eating bird eggs, snails, crabs, and considered lizards a delicacy. Unfortunately, fish, except for dangerous sharks, did not come to the island. Slowly, people started to die from scurvy. They had enough meat from birds and crabs to avoid starvation, but the lack of vitamins severely affected their health and psyche. Several soldiers died from scurvy. People decided to mount an expedition to make their situation known. They built a makeshift raft, and 4 men set off across the ocean towards the mainland, a journey of 1,200 kilometers. It took them 3 weeks, during which they lost 1 person, and the rest were on the verge of death. Nevertheless, by some miracle, they reached Acapulco. However, they found out that the current authorities in Mexico had no interest in the island or rescuing the abandoned garrison. The men turned to the American military for help. The U.S. Navy prepared a ship for the rescue of the survivors, and in June 1914, the ship arrived at the island, offering to take the survivors aboard and head to Acapulco. By that time, only 14 men, 6 women, and 6 children were left on the island. However, Captain Romario Arno, who was essentially the governor of the island, refused the Americans' offer. Leaving the island would mean any country could claim the land. In Mexico, such an act would be considered treason, and the captain would face the gallows. Additionally, he still hoped for help from the Mexican government, so they continued to suffer from hunger, gradually losing people who were dying from scurvy. But they held on for quite a while. 2 years later, on October 5, 1916, Arno, climbing the lighthouse, spotted a ship on the horizon. By then, people were in complete despair. A few surviving men rushed in canoes to chase the ship, hoping to inform about their dire situation, but they couldn't catch up. A wave capsized their canoe, and all who embarked on that pursuit drowned. On the island, only 1 man, Victoriano Alvarez, the lighthouse keeper, remained, along with 15 women and children. It should be noted that Victoriano Alvarez was not an officer or even a soldier. He was a civilian lighthouse keeper. Being in such a confined society and in such a critical situation seemed to have driven him insane. He proclaimed himself the king of the island and effectively turned all women and children into slaves. They faced constant beatings and violence. Alvarez formed a harem with 3 girls who refused to submit to his will, and he threatened to kill them and feed them to sharks, which he actually did with a 15-year-old girl and her mother. He had no authority over Captain Arno's widow, Alicia Rivera, who took over her late husband's duties. However, the frightened women could not even signal for help when they saw a sail on the horizon, as Alvarez did not want to lose his violent kingdom. But on July 18, 1917, Alicia Rivera spotted a ship near the island. It only needed to signal the lighthouse, and she, along with one of the girls from Alvarez's harem, Tirza Reed, ran to the rock where the lighthouse was located. However, Alvarez noticed this and caught up with them. Tirza tried to stop him, but he began beating her. At that moment, Captain Arno's widow managed to grab a stolen hammer and struck many blows on the self-proclaimed king's skull. The women then climbed onto the lighthouse and made a distress call. An American ship, the Yorktown, docked at this cursed island. They were searching for secret German military bases during World War I. Captain Peril and his crew encountered 11 exhausted and half-insane survivors on the island, 3 women, a teenage girl, and 7 children. The 15-year-old girl looked no older than 8 and had also been part of Alvarez's harem. The survivors were taken to Mexico, where they were welcomed as if they had returned from the afterlife. For a long time, France and Mexico argued over who the island belonged to. Eventually, France successfully defended its claim, and in 1959-62, Mexico recognized the island of Clipperton as French territory. In 1959, France offered French citizenship to the 11 surviving islanders and their descendants, but none of them accepted. This is how the survival story on the Paradise Island came to an end. Currently, Clipperton Island belongs to France, and it remains uninhabited, with only an automatic weather station present. What are your thoughts on this story? Feel free to share them in the comments. Friends, if you want, you can support my channel with a paid YouTube subscription. Thank you all for watching to the end.